everybody, and welcome to Raising Vibrations and to the monthly forecasts. Hope you're doing well. And in today's video, I'm going to be helping you understand a little bit about aspects and phases. And this is my little piece on how I do my little forecasts in a unique way. So aspects and phases is a way that evolutionary astrology uses to measure the cycles that planets have in relationship to themselves, okay, and to other planets, pardon me. So what happens is you've got two planets, say for instance Pluto and Venus, and what evolutionary astrology will do is they will take those two archetypes and measure the relationship that they have between each other, and then from that measurement and from that relationship establish what type of phase and what type of evolutionary condition those planets carry within each other. And it's really fascinating because when you begin to measure your planets in relationship to other planets, you begin to see the development of how you actually experience your life through these aspects and phases. Now, I've got a little slideshow over here quickly that I want to show you in terms of what is the philosophy behind aspects and phases and what type of methodology do we use to actually measure this, okay? So I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so what you're looking at is two pictures. On the left-hand side over here, you can see this is about life itself, okay? The first thing that we understand is that everything is in a cyclic formation. Everything is moving through time and space. And so because of that, it is not separate that when you look at two planets or three planets in a birth chart, that they are also in this life cycle. There is a life cycle that each planet has. And each planet in relationship to another is reflecting where that life cycle is. It's no different than measuring a new moon, a first quarter moon, a last quarter moon, and a full moon. They're exactly the same thing. We just do it with planets now. And you can see that when you have a new moon, there's a new intention. When you have a full moon, we're coming into a halfway completion cycle. Again, phasal relationship and life, how it's evolving. The picture on the right-hand side reflects to us that everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything. Okay, it's like a revolving door. The moment that you walk through a revolving door, as you're moving outward, somebody from the outside is coming inward, and that door is revolving us around it. And it's like as one energy moves outward like that, another one's moving in. And everything is in a consistent relationship with everything else. And so because of that, it's natural for us to understand that when we look at planets in our birth chart, there's a natural cycle in terms of awareness, and there's a natural phasal relationship that exists between planets. And when we measure that, what we get is this beautiful harmonic dynamic of where we are in our consciousness and how that has been developed. Okay? And the next thing is how do we actually then establish and what methodology do we use in order to understand these aspects and phases? Well, in evolutionary astrology, you work with the planets, okay? So you've got Mercury, Venus, you've got Mars, you've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, okay? And then you have the sun. Now, in this diagram, everything revolves around the sun. So when you measure something in evolutionary astrology terms, there's always a focal point, right? There's a focal point, and there's always a planet that's in relationship to that focal point. And the way that you understand what focal point you have to look at, you understand the relationship that these planets have to the sun. So the sun will always be a focal point, okay? That's so when you say, for instance, want to understand the phasal relationship between Neptune and Jupiter, well, then it has a little bit of a different cycle, but still the same. When you measure planets in relationship to each other, you're measuring the fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. The fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. So therefore, if I had to say, for instance, ask you, what is the phasal relationship between Jupiter and Neptune? You would go, Jupiter is the fastest moving planet, Neptune's the slowest moving planet, and so therefore, Neptune would be your focus point, because the slowest moving planet is always the focus point. And that's the key that I want you to take away from this conversation. When you measure aspects and phases in your chart, you're measuring two things. One, if you're measuring it against the sun will always be a focus point. So you're always looking for the focus point. And that will always be the sun if you're comparing it against something. Secondly, if you're comparing two planets with each other, you always measure the slowest moving planet as the focus point. So what happens now is you go, okay, I've identified that Neptune is the slowest moving planet. Jupiter's in relationship to it. And so then how do I understand how this works? Very simple. You get a little chart. And this is courtesy of the Evolutionary Astrology glossary, an ebook. And as you can see here on the chart, you've got this whole entire thing. New phase, crescent phase, first quarter phase, gibbous phase, all these phases. And each phase represents an aspect of development. So what you would do is you would take your slowest moving planet and put it at the 0. You would take your fastest moving planet and mathematically calculate the degrees of separation. Okay, so if Neptune's here and Jupiter, say for instance here, you would see that Jupiter is exactly 90 degrees, 90 clicks away from Neptune. And by understanding that phasal relationship, you would go, okay, it's a crisis in action square. And this is what I love about it so much. When we look at squares in astrology, we're like, oh, it's a square. But in EA, there's two types of squares. There's a crisis in action square and a crisis in consciousness square. And they're remarkably different in the sense. Okay, so you can actually try and read your chart. So I've got Pluto square Mars as an example. The way that Pluto square Mars is going to work in your chart, if it was crisis in consciousness versus crisis in action, are going to be remarkably different. Now, when you have that power within your own awareness to apply that to your chart, you can actually see what you're specifically looking at in terms of your evolutionary development. And it's really, really fascinating. So the next time you begin to understand your chart in terms of aspects and phases, I highly encourage you to learn about aspects and phases, to go and investigate it. And part of my astrology school, I actually teach this when I educate anybody that's wanting to understand evolutionary astrology. So this is something that when you really want to get into astrology, it's something you don't like miss because it's so empowering. I'll give you a quick example again, just before we jump into this, okay? Let's say, for instance, I have Jupiter and I'm measuring Mars and Jupiter, okay? We know that Jupiter is the slowest moving planet in relationship to Mars. So Jupiter stands there. And we will say that Mars is exactly 300 degrees, okay, away from Jupiter. In other words, Mars has gone all the way around the astrology chart like that because it's moving in that motion. And it gets all the way to that 300 degrees over there. Now, Mars is what is called in a last quarter phase in relationship to Jupiter. So when you look at Mars and Jupiter in the chart and you understand that phasal relationship, you can actually see that the soul's desires in this lifetime, this is the evolutionary astrology, the soul's desires in this lifetime are actually evolving through individuating, in other words, finding and breaking out of the mold of belief systems that they used in the past and allowing us to see perspectives from different unique points of views. That's the way that Mars and Jupiter in a very plain way would be operating in somebody's chart. Now you come into a world that is very like homogenized and very sort of like this is how truth is and this is what it's got to be, and you put somebody in that's natural tendency is to not follow those rules. Can you begin to see the way that we as human beings are so complex? That's why we have a lot of people in the world saying, well, I'm an atheist, because most of them have got phasal relationships that are breaking down, that are not listening to the general consensus. How much do we accept other people for having their own evolutionary degree? We don't understand it, so therefore we judge it. And this is the type of dynamics that we can get into when we understand more of who we are as a human race to alleviate the chaos that we've got. Food for thought. Hi, my Taurus friends, and welcome to your sun sign forecast for the month of March. And this is for 2017. I hope you're well. And of course, as always, I really hope you enjoyed the little introduction video on the nature of aspects and phases. And hopefully today I'd be able to show you how that works and how you can actually begin to implement that within your own understanding of astrology. And of course, as always, if you actually want to study astrology in itself, I do actually teach that. And I'm running a beginner's course astrology that's beginning on the 11th of March. So if you're wanting to participate in that experience, just write me an email and I'll send you all the details on how to sign up as well. Otherwise, you can always go to the Facebook page, and that, of course, is the link below. Okay, so let's have a look at what's actually going on for you for this month. Of course, our focal point for you, Taurus, is always going to be the baseline, Pluto. And Pluto represents the nature of our unconscious emotional development. It's the way that we are evolving our life. And of course, with Pluto being in Taurus, remember the sun sign for you is Taurus. So the Taurus archetype is evolving its belief systems. Pluto is in the ninth house of its solar ninth house. So the structure, the overall structure of your cosmology, the overall structure of the truth that you use, the overall structure of how you see and perceive reality, okay? That structure is being reconstructed. With all this amount of word structure in place, I'm not surprised that we're talking about Capricorn over here, but this is really about the way in which what cosmology you use to identify the reality. So this experience of Pluto moving through the ninth house and in relationship to what March will be for you is a very big deal in terms of your truth, okay? So if you look at Jupiter at the moment, Jupiter is moving through Libra, and it's in your solar sixth house, okay? And so because of the nature of your philosophy being reconstructed, Jupiter in itself is that archetype that is about our truth. It's about the expansion of our perception of reality. And of course, that is under a deep mutation around getting clear about what type of perspective you use. So for Taurus, this is very much about learning. Okay, you're in a state of learning. You're in a state of wanting to really get clear and specific on what type of questions you use and what type of information you have that facilitates your overall truth. You see, you're beginning to understand what perspective you have, but in order to understand that perspective, you need to be able to have a very clear bunch of questions or a very clear, organized set of information that allows you to explore the question that you have about truth, okay? So the solar sixth house is deeply, deeply influencing the nature of the questions. Organization is a very big part, getting clear on your belief systems in that way, purifying them in that sense, okay? And then, of course, part of this process for you as well is looking at, again, the South Node, Neptune, Mercury, the Sun, Chiron. They're all situated in your 11th house, your solar 11th house, okay? Remember, we're talking about Taurus, okay? So the solar 11th house is where a lot of change has been taking place in your life, where surrender has been the key, right? So this solar eclipse that just recently took place, of course, had made changes to your friends and your group dynamics and what type of people you choose to associate with, etc. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say around what happened on your the solar eclipse, okay? Because of course that would give you a really, really intense understanding of what type of dynamics have been ending in your life and what type of wisdom you carry with yourself going forward around this ending, okay? So the group dynamics and what truths do they subscribe to? That would be the questions that these transits are asking you at this stage, okay? Now, if we go over to the main event for March, I feel that Venus is, of course, the biggest player over here, all right? And Venus, as you can see over there, is currently stationary on the day of this recording, the 4th of March. And Venus will actually go retrograde on the 4th of March as well. So what we've got here is now Venus moving into retrograde motion. And Venus is situated in your solar 12th house, along with Uranus and along with Mars. Now, this is an interesting dynamic because you've got Aries energy and you've got Pisces energy, okay? Pisces energy is about how we close a chapter in our life, and Aries energy is about feeling the excitement of exploring a new chapter. And that kind of middle point between ending and new is really where the whole entire collective is. But in your particular case, it's very much about what type of specific truth do you subscribe to that you once used as a way of evolving yourself, and what type of desire there is to explore an entirely new set of belief systems and cosmologies and ideals that will begin to obviously influence your life's path. So, deeply within inside of yourself, You are emotionally beginning to relate to a new cosmology, a new perception. And it doesn't have to be something like all, rainbows and fairies, spirituality, and just simply be like, you can find yourself not drinking coffee anymore. And the reason why you did that is because you read something along the lines of it having a certain effect on the body, and you found that that was really, really impactful and resonating for you. And you felt this is something you wanted to cut out of your life, Jupiter in the 6th house. And so as you kind of just clear away things that you don't feel resonate with you anymore, you start to dissolve truths about yourself, and you begin to explore new ways of seeing yourself, okay? So that will be happening on the 4th and 5th of March, of course. And then on the 9th of March, we've got Mars entering Taurus, okay? There you can see there Mars enters Taurus on the 9th of March. And I want to emphasize, the whole of March is about Venus and its retrograde motion, okay? And the reason why is because Taurus is an archetype that is co-ruled with this planet Venus, and Libra is a sign that is also co-ruled by the planet Venus, okay? Taurus and Libra. Taurus reflects the way that we inwardly see ourselves and relate to ourselves, and Libra reflects the way that we outwardly relate to others. So the inner and outer. So Venus going retrograde this month is going to promote for us the dynamics of how we are inwardly and then beginning to change outwardly, right? So as Mars enters Taurus, we begin this new direction that begins to explore the nature of our essential needs. There's an attention on our inner world and our essential needs. So your day-to-day existence becomes, what are my needs? How am I facilitating my needs to my overall goals, my overall life direction? And in your case, what needs are facilitating a new cosmology? So that will happen. And then, of course, on the 12th of March, we have a full moon taking place, okay? And this full moon is going to bring into awareness the first initial question around, what are you letting go that is no longer supporting you anymore, and what are you bringing into your life from that letting go process that is expanding your sense of spiritual abundance, okay? In other words, when you read a book that contains loads and loads of insights, once that book is complete, you don't attach the book to your body as a way of remembering the insights. They're just present with you whenever they need it. And so the same thing's happening here. Whatever insights arrived for you when the solar return happened, the solar cycle happened, this new moon, now on the 12th of March, that's when you're going to be, okay, I have these insights, and now I'm going to begin to step by step begin to integrate them into this new direction. And of course, for you, the new direction is around your needs in conjunction with your truth, okay? So that's the information there that's going to play out. And then, of course, Mercury will enter Aries on the 13th of March, which will bring into a situation in which this Pisces energy will start to move away, and you will begin to then explore these new directions. Mercury will begin to ask these new questions. Okay, right, let's explore this, like your curiosity around exploration. Okay, and then on the 20th of March, the Sun enters Aries. And that's a big deal because, of course, as the Sun enters Aries, we begin this whole new evolutionary cycle around what? For you, it's about exploring and pioneering what type of perspective you are going to be using that is in alignment with your truth. What type of perspective are you going to be using that's in alignment with your new truth? So the example I said was that you read something in an article around coffee. You decided to not want to drink coffee and cut that out of your daily routine. As you cut that out of your daily routine, the Sun enters Aries. It joins up with Venus. Mercury is there now, and you begin to explore this new experience. You begin to take notes. You begin to pay attention to what this is doing for you. Is it the truth? Was this information really factual for me? And you begin to observe how this new choice has influenced your perception of reality and cosmology. You get it? Okay. Now, as that happens, as that Sun enters Aries, we begin to then manifest this new instinctual direction. And then on the 22nd of March, something really significant happens. Okay, the moon hits Pluto. Okay, the moon hits Pluto. You can see here that the sun then is approaching the Venus archetype here, and Mercury is also making a connection to Uranus. And that type of connection over there is going to begin to open up a very deep sense of, I want to kind of break away really from these emotional attachments to the old way of doing things, and I want to clean them up and I want to let go of them. And so that energy is really, really going to help us push out what is no longer needed anymore. Okay, and give us the push necessary to move into the new direction. So there's going to be a very big clearing out stage on the 22nd of March. And of course, that's got to do again with the Venus retrograde, your values and how those are adjusting and changing. And then on the 27th of March, we've got a new moon in Aries. And this new moon in Aries is going to do what for us? Okay, firstly, it's going to instinctually create an inner need for us to explore and let go of the past completely. And before that new moon hits, right, on the 27th, can you see here that the sun and Venus have switched places? There we go. They've switched places, and the moon is conjunct the south node. So the past and your emotional identity to the past will be dissolved. The switch between attention of the past and the future will begin to then take place in our consciousness. And then as that happens on the 27th, the new moon kicks into place and we're ready to go. We're ready to go. We're ready to begin exploring new ways in which we're going to find our belief systems, our cosmology, the way in which we value that, what are our essential needs. That's going to deeply shift for us on the 28th of March. And then on the 30th of March, we have Pluto at 19 degrees and Jupiter at 19 degrees. And that's going to make a big T-square with Mercury, Uranus, Pluto, and Jupiter. And that T-square in itself is going to create the new direction for all of us around what was the past and what was the future. So it's this continuous like breaking down of the old, reestablishing the new, breaking down of the old, reestablishing the new, breaking down of the old, reestablishing the new. And by doing that consistently, we begin to find new insights, not begin to find new insights, but we begin to establish new insights going forward and integration. This is all about integration this month and understanding what are those essential needs, reflecting on the past, letting go of the past, dissolving, instinctually putting in new in, okay? And then finally, on the 31st of March, we have Mercury enter Taurus. And as Mercury enters Taurus, what happens for us? We begin to then communicate the nature of these needs and value systems. And Venus will begin to move into Pisces. And that will be a process of, again, deconditioning, letting go, breaking down. All right. Completion cycle is on our way. And Venus will move into Pisces, giving us the inspiration again to reassign new values. So this is a really big month. Pay attention to your essential needs. Okay. All right, my Taurus friends, have a fantastic month. I really hope that you enjoyed this forecast, and be sure to write in the comments below in terms of your experience, okay? Other than that, have a fantastic month. Bye.